Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to do UV unwrapping. So I'm going to open up the project we've been working on, which is this robot character. And the purpose of UV unwrapping is to create a mapping from this 3D object to a 2D texture that we can apply to this. So to begin, I'm going to change my view. And we want to see our UV mapping. So one way of doing that would be to click on UV and click on the UV editor. And what that would bring up is this UV editor, and that can work. And if you have multiple monitors, this is very nice because you can throw this onto one entire separate monitor. But what we're going to use is we're going to go to Windows, and we're going to pick the save layout down here, which is Perspective and UV Editor. And what that will do is display our model on the left-hand side here in perspective view, and the UV layout. And you can see this UV layout is quite a mess. And so what we need to do is put order into this. And one way of doing that would be to take all these vertices and move them all around. But luckily, tools like Maya give us some methods to do this in a little bit more automated fashion. And so what we're going to use are UV mappings. And under UV, we have different types of mappings we can use: cylindrical, planar, spherical. And the spherical or the cylindrical ones work well for character modeling, because if you think about it, this whole body is a series of cylinders. So I'm going to first select some faces, and I'm going to right click and go to face select mode and select the faces I want. And a useful tool when you're selecting is this grow selection. And so I'm going to grow the selection down until I have at least everything I want selected, and then I'll just deselect what I don't want selected. So I'll start deselecting these elements I don't want selected as part of my UV mapping. And the goal here is to separate out elements that can map reasonably well to flat surfaces if they're mapped together. And sometimes there's quite a bit of detail here you have to pay attention to. For example, you can have some faces that stay selected, and you have to make sure you deselect them all so that all I have are the faces that I want to make a mapping. In this case, it's just the head. So those, you can see as I select those faces, the corresponding UVs are highlighted in this mess over here on the right. In order to add some order to that, I'm going to add a cylindrical mapping. And you can see this cylinder comes out, and we get a little bit more orderly looking object over here. And what I'm going to do is take that and move it to the side for the moment. And you can see this is a much neater layout of my model. And what a UV map is if I go to vertex selection mode and I select, well, I'm going to select UV shell and then in here select vertices. You can see as I select vertices or UVs on the right, it shows the vertice that it's selected on the left. So what this is a mapping of this 3D object onto a 2D surface so that later on I can put a texture on this and match it up. Unfortunately, you can see this one vertice kind of ran away and got to the outside. If I go to UV select mode, I can just kind of move that approximately where I need it. And we can fix this up by selecting vertices and just moving them into more logical places. I'm going to just get them a little closer. And we can then also go to edge select mode. And you'll notice that when I select an edge, it selects the edge, both edges where they are lined up. So in this case, if I select both of those edges, we can see it corresponds to this edge right here, and this one, which is disconnected, corresponds to that edge right there. So I want to join those up. And the way I can do that is select them, then right click, go to polygons, and sew UV edges. And I'll just sew those back up. And so I have a little better layout here. Go back to selecting UVs, and I might just select all of these here and align them to the left. Here you can align to left, right, top, or bottom. I'm going to align them to the left so they're lined up. And I have a pretty reasonable layout for the robot head. Going back to here, I'm going to go back to face selection mode and continue on. So the arm is a logical place to go next. I'm going to select, rather than trying to select all of these inside of here, it is easier just to select a number up to a nice even selection there. And then I'll just again use the select grow method to increase my selection until I have what I want. I think I need to do one more. And then I'll just move this one to the side and we have our arm selected. And you'll notice that it looks like there's a number of these that are kind of out. So the hand has been squeezed down and it's flat. We can fix that possibly by going to polygons, and there's some optimization routines here that can fix some of your layouts. I'm going to click on optimize, and now I can see that this is probably better aligned with I don't want to do the unfold. There we go. This is probably pretty good, at least for our purposes. we might want to come in here and clean this up a little bit. And so there's a bit of work to get this arm nicely lined up. In fact, what I might do is just, and you might need to kind of reselect it. And if you need to reselect a UV, you can pick UV or right click, pick UV, then UV shell, and that allows you to pick the individual UVs. I'm going to maybe try to reapply a cylinder again, and we're going to rotate. Well, if you apply cylinder mapping, you'll notice that it came out in the Y direction, and we really want it in the X. So I'm going to rotate along the Z axis 90 degrees, and then spread this out. And by pulling these grab handles, we can change the way this mapping works. So if I pull that mapping out to the side, so we're trying to play around with it directly and see if we could get something decent. We couldn't really, so we needed to apply a mapping. And now we've got something that's a little better. And by playing around with these different objects, these different grab handles, we can optimize what we're getting to the best of our ability. Might then apply another optimize, and that's not too bad. There's some work that needs to be done, but for our sake of our demo, that gets us close enough. So we've got the arm, and these are all called shells. So a contiguous group of UVs are called shells. And what we are trying to do is optimize our shells so that we have a nice layout that's easy to work with. Another thing that we can do that can simplify our work is actually by dividing our model in half. If your model is symmetrical, then deleting one half of your model can help. And that also helps because we can look inside. So for example, if I go back to selecting UV and shell and I select the arm, you can see, I can verify that yes, I probably got the arm, the right faces for the arm. And you'll notice that since we deleted half of it, we now only have one half of the head. That will come in handy because when we copy this back, the UVs will be mapped on exactly the same spot and we can use the same imagery. Again, that only works really well if you are going to map the same images on the right and the left, which I intend on doing. So I'm going to select the faces for the body. I'm using UV shell select mode because these are already connected into shells. They're just disconnected from each other. And I'm going to add these. I think I'm going to split this up here. So the leg is somewhat separate. And there are pros and cons on how you divide up. And in actuality, I think I don't want any of that. I'm just going to divide it up at the waist and then make the bottom half a separate mapping. So just deselect all of these faces, which I don't want selected. And so we'll do the upper torso and then the bottom torso separately. So once I have that, I'll apply another cylindrical mapping. Let me pull this off to the side. Try to set this up to be pretty reasonable. Now it's optimized. I'm going to go into UV select mode. And you're in the UV editor, your WER and R keys work the same. So you can keep using those shortcuts to move some of these UVs that kind of go wherever they want. And sometimes going to edge select mode gives me a good hint about where things need to be. And what I'm trying to do is reconnect edges that should probably be connected. So I'm going to sew those edges together, then sew these edges together. And obviously I probably could work with this a little bit more and make it a little cleaner, but for a demo, that will have to do. And we just continue on. So now that I've got the leg selected, again, another cylindrical mapping. Pull it to the side, and we'll rotate this out to the 90-degree mark. You can stretch it in here as well. And I think that will be adequate for now. One of the things that we can do, we can see that we have some stray elements that probably should be on perhaps this side. If I look at the edges, so perhaps this would fit better over. And I probably want to make the division along the inside of the leg so that it's less visible. So that's the metal. I think I'm going to move this one over, and maybe some of these are going to go over. So let's move this one over to that side. The way to do that is I'm going to select this edge and that edge, and I'm going to cut those UV edges, and that's going to make this a separate piece. I can then select this face. It can be moved over. And if I put it in fairly close, and then I can just sew these edges back up. In fact, I can probably select both of these edges, this one and that one. So the edges, and now I moved that one section over. We then have this material here. I think there's some splitting, dividing we need to do here. It's kind of a mess, but we would do the same thing and clear that all up and make this one a little smoother. For the knee here, I'm going to select, actually I want faces. I'm going to select the right and left side. I'm going to grow this so that I grab this middle one as well. And then I'm going to do a planar mapping. So rather than a cylinder, I'll pick a plane. And what that does is it lines both those sides on the same one, which is nice because there's really no need to map these separately. They'll probably have the same graphics pretty much on the left and the right, so I'll leave them lined up that way. Let's see what shells are already existent. That shell is, since I pulled it in from a cylinder already, it's already pretty well lined up. I can pull it to the side and let's see what it looks like to begin with. I think I'm going to go ahead and apply a cylindrical mapping to it anyway. Obviously it's not lined up the way we need to, so we want to rotate along the z-axis 90 degrees to bring it in the same plane, and then I'm just going to optimize it, and I think it'll be pretty close. So there's the mapping for the cylinder part. Perhaps some things we can do with this line here, which corresponds to, if we take the edge, you can see it's that. It's all along the edge here. It's kind of messy right here, so if you double click on an edge, it will select an edge loop. And I'm going to align to top. So we can do some things like this to clean these up a little bit. And you can do the same thing with the bottom one and get this kind of a little neater. And it looks like this started off as a cylinder already, so it's pretty well mapped. I'm going to move it to the side, and it looks pretty good, but I'm going to reapply a cylindrical mapping just to make sure. And we would do the same things to clean that one up. back to UV shell, select the foot. So we have the front of the foot. And maybe I'll apply a mapping for that. Rotate it along the X 90 degrees. Maybe a plane mapping might work better. We'll leave that like that for now. And for the bottom of the foot, plane mapping should work well. So that completes getting all of our UVs separated out. Now what we want to do is set these up so that, you know, for example, the sections with the feet in them don't need to be the largest thing don't need that much resolution. So we're going to select those, and I'm going to shrink them down. And proportionally, this arm probably could be a little smaller. So, and this does not have to do with the size of the actual components in 3 dimensions. It has to do with how much detail do I really want on that section. So this torso, probably proportionally, I might want it to have a little bit more detail, so I make it larger. And the knees probably don't need to be that large. So I'll shrink those down quite a bit. And then probably could reduce the lower leg a little bit. Once I'm satisfied with the relative size, now I need to fit all of these elements in here. And you could do that in the upper right-hand quadrant of our UV map. And you could do that by hand, but probably it's easier just to let Maya do that for you. Oh, I have to select all my polygons first. So I have them all here. I could do this initially, get it approximately where I want them. And if you click on layout, it will do a pretty good job of positioning your shells so that they fit inside of that square. So that's essentially the process of taking your 3D model and mapping them into a UV map. And then of course I want to return the other half, so I'm going to go into object mode, select my mesh, and then edit, duplicate special. Then I'll take both of these meshes, and select them both and join them back up. And you can see where the meshes show up. You notice that the right and left hand sides are on the same location, so that's kind of nice. It joins them up. And what you might also do is in here do some optimization just to make them look a little better. And that's it. So that's how to create a UV mapping. Thank you very much.